Hello everyone, this is Crazy Flying Chicken, and what I'm about to show you is a feedback video. It's a little bit different from what I normally do, but I think that a lot of people have a vested interest in the Amphibious Assault content patch, so I figured I would do a video here as feedback, sort of like an open letter to the devs in terms of the ways we can improve the Shipyard system and the Farranac coast in general. So right now a lot of people are having complaints that Farranac coast tends to turn into a bit of a stalemate. So we decided to put that to the test over a series of a couple of days. Myself and Pug and a number of other people, including a great deal of randoms, put that to the test and tried a series of extensive or expensive assaults on enemy beaches, multiple beaches, and shipyards. We tried a couple of theories. We picked everybody's brain to try to figure out the best ways to go about this. And in the end, we came up with three distinct different kinds of D-Day landing scenarios in which we thought we would be able to break the enemy's line and establish our own foothold enough to be able to take a town or take ground. So what you're watching are a series of videos of those attacks, bearing in mind that these are in no particular order, but the most important thing to take from these videos is that they were all failures, almost dismal failures. So even with what I would consider a seasoned or a veteran group of players with a solid plan and considerable preparation before each of these invasions, we found it was incredibly difficult to try to get our foothold on the enemy territory enough to be able to plant our FOB or plant a town hall to hold the ground. So in the early stages of planning for our amphibious assaults, we realized that there needs to be three things in order to make a successful beached amphibious assault. The first thing is a purpose. In our very first attempt at a D-Day landing, we just tried running with APCs and driving onto the beach and planting our soldiers, take the high ground, and then hold it for our APCs to continue ferrying men across the water, which worked okay, but the problem was even if we did manage to secure that territory and hold that ground, we had no way of getting a CV there to plant a FOB in order to hold the territory. It would have been an indefinite struggle getting just people to the beach. So the first thing we need when planning an amphibious assault is a purpose, and what that purpose is a shipyard. If we have a shipyard, we can bring a CV ashore, and if we can bring a CV ashore, we can plant a FOB. If we have a FOB, we have a foothold. So the first thing we need is a shipyard. The second thing is opportunity. We were playing on the Dog Europe server, which was 100 days old, and we noticed that literally every single beach, anywhere where you could get from the water to land, was covered in AI defenses on both sides of the river. So there was really no opportunity for us to really pick and choose the direction we'd want to come in. Plus, with the shipyards being placed where they are, we only really have one or two different options, and the enemy could focus their defenses around those shipyards, making it impossible for us to really have a lot of opportunity to take the ground. So the last thing is the options. Again, with the shipyards, because there are so few shipyards here, in order to take it, we need options. But as you can see from the map, there's only maybe 2 shipyards per major island, and that means there's only 2 options of attack in any direction, and that makes it very difficult for us to surprise the enemy, and it makes it very limited in terms of tactical flexibility. Yes, there's a lot of open shores, but without the shipyard we can't have a foothold, so really the options are quite limited. Okay, so what you're looking at now is a map of Farranac Coast, and I'm going to show you what the 3 different types of strategies that we used. So the first one was the enemy had control of Mara down here, the Wardens, and we were playing as Colonial. We were set up in Yuxta, and we decided we could have probably gone the correct way and gone this way, but we felt like that wouldn't be any fun. We wanted to try a beach landing, so instead we went the hard way. We set up a FOB on the beach here, and we decided we'd try to land on this beach here, because it seemed to be the least defended, and the Warden defenses were mostly concentrated along this front. So we thought we'd try to land with a beach with a bunch of APCs and try to take the high ground. What we found was that our infantry, even though they were pretty good, they did manage to stay on the beach for long periods of time. They only managed to hold the ground for maybe 2 to 5 minutes at best, and they would take the high ground up here and then they would get wiped out. The problem was that in 2 to 5 minutes it wasn't enough time to send our APCs back to pick up more soldiers and then bring them back to the front. So ultimately, even though once we landed we managed to hold some high ground and kill a good number of Wardens, we weren't able to to successfully take the town because A, we couldn't get a CV there, even though we could have probably brought it over the land. But we primarily, the main problem here was that we couldn't sustain the assault with the APCs. They were simply too slow, and our infantry died way too fast. Okay, so the second type of assault we tried was we tried a sort of wave assault. So this time we were playing as wardens over here in Westwatch, and we were trying to attack the town hall over here at Terra. Now, what we wanted to do was build three tanks and a barge with full of infantry, and load these 4 barges. So 3 barges with tanks on it, and 1 barge with infantry. And we were going to sail them out here, and we were going to just basically blitz it. So we decided we would land all 3 tanks, pushed straight to the town hall, knock it out, and then quickly reestablish our own and put up an FOB. Now so we managed to get 2 of those tanks ashore, but the moment they hit that shore, they got opened up on with just tons and tons of AT turrets. We had considered it, and we tried mortaring some of them down before the invasion by landing our guys on some rocks on the side, but it just, because there were so many defenses, we couldn't see them all. There were some hidden behind the garrisons, there were some hidden behind bunkers. It was simply impossible for us to account for them all, so our 2 tanks, the moment they got off their barge, were immediately opened up on and destroyed. So we tried with one last attack. Well, from that attack, we learned something that could definitely work. Was we would try to do it in waves rather than one committed assault. What we did this time was loaded 3 tanks up. Well, once again, setting up in Westwatch and the enemy over here in Terra. And what we decided to do was to load up 3 tanks into barges and one barge full of infantry. But this time we took 1 tank and 1 barge of infantry out to Terra, landed it, threw smokes down everywhere, and then emptied the barge with the tank inside that smoke and use it to level the defenses. And it definitely worked to some extent. We're still fairly confident that the system could work if we had a disciplined enough force. But because the enemy defenses were so thick, and because they'd had so much time to prepare, after the second wave of doing that, the enemy had brought enough players that we had to give it up. So instead, we tried the same thing. We brought 1 barge full of infantry and a tank down over here to Cora, where we knew they weren't expecting us, and we undocked and we tried the same thing. And we had a much better success. We did manage to get ashore. We killed a good number of defenses, but we weren't able to establish much more of a beachhead beyond the shipyard. And because we were so far from home, it was impossible to keep those reinforcements coming. So ultimately, we were defeated and pushed off, and that was the end of that. Okay, so going back, there are 3 conditions that need to be met in order for a successful amphibious assault to take place. The first is a purpose. You have to take a shipyard in order to land a CV. If you can't land a CV, you can't build a FOB. If you can't build a FOB, you can't establish a foothold on the enemy's island. So the first and always foremost thing for an amphibious assault to take place is a shipyard, a purpose. So the shipyards will always be the target of an amphibious assault. The second is opportunity. If those shipyards are covered in defenses, AT turrets and tier 3 walls for miles, then there's no opportunity to take ground there, and there's no amphibious assault that can take place. For the third, there are options. In the late stages of the game, we've seen defenses go up on literally every shore where the enemy could possibly make a landing. And when this happens, there's really only one strategic choice to make, and that's to take the shipyards. Because as we explained earlier, you need a shipyard to land a CV. So you could focus, as a defender, you could focus your defenses around those shipyards, and there's nothing that the opponent could do about it. They have to go through them. So what I've done is I've created a feedback map for Farranac Coast, which I hope will, in the easiest way possible, alleviate some of these concerns and hopefully increase the number of amphibious assaults that take place, and also increase the number of areas where amphibious assaults will happen. Okay, so what I've done here is I've created a map of Farranac Coast, which I hope will help to satisfy more of those conditions to increase the number of amphibious assaults that take place. The first thing you're going to notice are a lot more shipyards. I did that because at every place where you want there to be a beach conflict, there needs to be a shipyard. So you can see I placed shipyards on each of the beaches that I think are critical for creating conflict. So I'm going to use this one as an example. At Sunder Beach, I placed a shipyard here and removed this road. And the reason I did that was because to make the wardens supply, or to make the Wardens defend that shipyard, they're going to have to run a supply line down this road, which means it opens up this entire length of beach for the Colonials to make an attack. If this was their choice of port, then attacking this shipyard could also be aided by any attack along the beach. So this beach, which would otherwise see almost no conflict whatsoever, suddenly, by removing a road and adding a ship port, we've increased the huge number of area where amphibious assaults can take place and make a notable difference for the Colonials. So the second thing we need to talk about is opportunity. In order to increase the opportunity for players to make an assault, we're going to look again at the port here at Terra. And you'll notice that the cliffs on either side are extremely high and hard to take. So conversely, if we look at the port here at Westwatch, you'll notice the wharf extends quite a lot out into the water and there's a lot of open space and there's not a lot of places for the Wardens to place defenses. So the devs have talked a little bit about removing the ability to build defenses along the beach, and I think this is another way we can choose the difficulty of each of these shipyards. So from a map design perspective, we can choose which ship ports are going to be the easiest to take versus which ones are going to be the hardest to take based on their geographic location on the map. So for example, the one here at Terra, over here, if I was going to make an attack as a Warden on this beach, it makes sense that this is a really difficult shipyard to take with high cliffs on either side, because it's right next to the town hall. It would take an extremely coordinated force of Wardens to land and assault, but the payoff would be huge. You'd knock out that town hall even before the Colonials noticed what hit them. Meanwhile, if the Colonials wanted to attack the Westwatch approach, similarly, this port is much easier to take, so this is a much more likely approach for the Colonials to want to attack. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about, this is very special to me, is this shipyard here. If you look on the basic map, this is the unaltered map, you'll notice there's no shipyard on the south side of the river, River Mercy, which means that if the Colonials wanted to set up a FOB here at the Pleading Wharf, and then just assault the Wardens using APCs on constant amphibious assaults, they'd be allowed to, because the shipyard is there. So if they ever did manage to secure a beachhead, they'd hold a shipyard and they could get a CV into Husk Hollow and rebuild their FOB. So this is a practical line of assault for the Colonials. However, the reverse is not true. Because there's no shipyard on the south side, if a Wardens attempted to make a landing on the South River, they'd never be able to get their CV ashore, which means that this is not a practical assault route. The only way for the Wardens to regain control of this island would be to set up on Apollo's Landing and attack Korra from the rear. And this is a huge distance to cross, especially with the way it is now, because there's only the one option. The Colonials could just spam defenses around that single shipyard, and there'd be absolutely nothing the Wardens could do. This is the absolute only way the Wardens are going to be able to get back onto this island. So when I go back to this map, what I've created, I added a shipyard here, not because I think that it should be equal opportunity to go back and forth. In fact, I kind of like that it's a one-way bridge. But what we've done here is we've created a two-way water bridge. The Colonials could set up a FOB and attack constantly to try to retake that wharf, but the Wardens could do the same thing and constantly attack the other way, and we've created something of a water bridge. This is what I'm talking about with the third condition, options. Being able to have, you can choose the direction of which of conflict by choosing which ports you're going to attack. So in this situation, we've got a two-way bridge. The Wardens can attack with APCs and the Colonials can attack with APCs. And I've set that up all over the map. You'll see the Wardens can do the same thing here. They can go across to Spearhead Beach, and the Colonials can do the same. And again, down here in Korra, if the Wardens control Korra, they can go across this way, and the Colonials can do the same. Again, up here at Winged Shore, if the Colonials wanted to attack West Wharf, they could do that, or Westwatch, they could do that, and the Wardens could do the same. So you see these two-way bridges that are appearing all across the map. This is really what it comes down to. This is how we're going to increase amphibious warfare. The average player doesn't understand these complex D-Day scenarios, which are still possible. Like I said, if you set up a FOB, you could do a complex D-Day scenario on Terra and take it. It doesn't take away those options. Instead, It just gives them an avenue of attack. It gives them something simple to understand in order to create these constant amphibious attacks. When beachheads are established, it doesn't mean that there's a fob. It means that that one side is trying to get control of the enemy's shipyard right across the way. But again, all of this is dependent on at least some mechanic that is going to prevent AI defenses from being placed too close to the water or too close to the shipyards. The closer the AI defenses are allowed to be placed to the water or to the shipyards is going to dictate heavily how difficult it is to take those objectives. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation. Please like and subscribe.